A few weeks ago, I uploaded a video showing how I built a new island for the kitchen remodel I'm doing in my almost 200-year-old farmhouse. Today, it's finally time to build a top for it, and believe me when I tell you, this project is a roller coaster ride. My name is John. Welcome to my money pit. When Lisa and I bought this house back in 2022, one of the things that appealed to us was the fact that this property has a building on it that was perfect for our business. Actually, it was almost perfect. Our business is aquariums, and the hardwood floors in the building just weren't going to support them. With the help of my youngest son, we ripped out those floors and discovered why they were so bouncy. It was just 3/4 inch oak attached directly to the floor joists. Apparently that's pretty common down here. After the floors were out, it exposed these incredible 2x8 floor joists that are heart pine and probably 150 years old. As someone who's been a woodworker most of my life, there was no way I was going to throw those away. So I cut them out and stored them in the back of my barn, knowing exactly what I was going to do with them. When we were looking at houses back in 2021, we walked through one that had a solid cherry countertop on the kitchen island. Lisa and I both fell in love with that and have wanted to do one ever since. And as soon as I saw these floor joists, I knew that was the perfect project to save these for. It only took 3.5 years to finally get to it, but that brings us to today. It's finally time to make a countertop out of this amazing wood. But as soon as I started with this project, I ran into my first of many problems. The first is I don't have the equipment to properly mill this lumber and get it ready to glue up as a huge panel. If I was going to do this right, I needed to enlist the help of someone who did. This is when I called my friend Ryan from another piece of wood in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. I told Ryan what I had going on and asked if he'd be able to mill this lumber for me, and he said absolutely, just bring it on by, but before I could do that, I had to get this stuff ready. See, when the hardwood floors were originally attached to these joists, they used cut nails. If you know anything about cut nails, you know they're a bitch to get out. Almost every piece of wood we pulled out broke the wood off and left the nails sticking out. Obviously, I couldn't bring them to Ryan this way, so I went through and pulled all those cut nails out by hand. I filled up an entire bucket. The good news is I got them all out, loaded about 10 of them up and brought them over to Ryan. He looked at them and said, "Oh man, this is going to be great to use for countertops." He was just as excited as me to see what was under 150 years worth of patina, but he wasn't in a position to do the job right there on the spot. I said, "Hey, take your time. I'm not going to be ready for this for a while anyway, but while I'm here, would it be too much trouble to just run one through the planer so I can get some footage of it?" He said, "Oh, that's not a problem at all." And he sent one through his grizzly planer and everything was going great until the next issue started to show its ugly head. Now, when I was looking at this wood, I saw all the tiny black dots on the surface and I knew exactly what those were. They're wormholes, and I just considered them to be something that would add character to this piece, not even thinking that where there's wormholes, there's tunnels. While Ryan was running this one piece through, it started to expose some of those tunnels, but I didn't panic. I said, "Hey, this is why I brought you 10 of them. I'm sure they're not all going to be like this. Let's just see how it goes." Well, a few weeks later, Ryan texted me and said, "John, you're going to want to see this." And he sent me this video. This wood was trash. I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, you could have filled it with epoxy and it would have just added character and all of that. No, the wood is trash. It looked terrible. Whether I want to or not, it's time to move on to plan B. Now I understand. I might not seem very emotional about this as we sit here today talking about it, but the truth is, I was as upset as I've ever been. I had been waiting for this for over 3 years and thought it would have been so cool to be able to tell people, yeah, this countertop is made from floor joists from that building out there. It was such a cool idea, but that cool idea, it was no more. I just had to accept it and move on. Plus, this was like 4 months ago, so I've had plenty of time to get over it. Anyway, plan B. I was dead set on still building this countertop out of wood, and since the heart pine wasn't any good, I knew I was going to have to buy wood to make this top out of. Ryan had suggested I check out Cygnus Lumber in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and that's exactly what I did. Cygnus is exactly the kind of business I love dealing with. It's a full-scale woodworking and lumber company that the owner Greg runs out of 2 huge buildings in his backyard. With me being someone that also runs a business out of 2 buildings in my backyard, I'm kind of partial to these kind of businesses. But don't think that with this being something that's in a guy's backyard, it's not a serious business or it's just something Greg does in his spare time. Oh no, this is as big as any other lumber supplier I've ever been to, and he has absolutely everything a woodworker could need. I went to Cygnus Lumber with one wood in mind. Just like everyone else that's ever made anything out of wood on YouTube, walnut. Thanks, Cam Anderson. I've worked with walnut many times in the past, and I've always enjoyed working with it, but there's one massive problem with it. No, I'm not talking about the black boogers you'll be picking for a week. I'm talking about the price. Walnut has always been one of the more popular woods, and now, because everyone on YouTube uses it, it's even worse. Again, thanks, Cam Anderson. The wood was going to cost me over $1,800 just for enough to do this countertop. Why was it going to be so much? Well, it's Cam's fault, of course. We've already established that. But also because I was going to need to get 8 quarter stock and had to get premium grade because this is the main focal point of my kitchen. And I was going to have Cygnus Lumber mill it down to 6 quarters. So I have that standard 1.5 inch thickness, which is pretty much the standard for all countertops. And yes, that means that 25% of that $1,800 was going to be sent right over into Greg's dust collector. What are you going to do? But thankfully, Greg has an amazing employee named Erin that was working with me on this. And she said, well, you could make this out of cherry and just finish it to be darker. Look at this one that I just did. I looked at these photos and said, that looks amazing. And cherry is one of my absolute favorite woods, but I was a professional wood finisher for almost a decade. I know how many steps it takes to get cherry to look like that. And she said, no, this was a 1-step process to get this look. I said, well, you need to share that secret formula with me. And she said, it's no secret. It's Rubio Monocoat, chocolate. I said, okay, then it's settled. I'll take the cherry. And instead of it costing me $1,800, it cost $800. Still a lot, but way better. I was happy about this for 2 reasons. 1, I already planned on using Rubio anyway. Again, thanks, Cam. And 2 is I have a cherry dining table that I built 25 years ago that's desperately in need of refinishing. I could use the same Rubio on both and they'll match. This is all going to work out fine. By the way, ask me anytime what my favorite YouTube channel is and my answer will never change. It's Blacktail Studio. I keep saying thanks, Cam, as if I'm talking shit. I'm not. I'm just being silly. That guy could make a video about picking black walnut boogers, and I promise I'd be one of the first to watch it. Anyway, it's finally time to address this cherry countertop build that by Blacktail Studio standards would be a complete joke because it doesn't have a live edge or 1 single ounce of epoxy in it. I know I keep doing this. I'm sorry. I got to go on another quick side note here. If you're a fan of Blacktail Studio like I am, have you ever wondered why in the world he created a ceramic coating for wood and not epoxy? Can you even imagine how much epoxy has been sold because of that man? He could probably own half of Portland from the profits of that epoxy. Anyway, my N3 Nano kit is on the way as we speak. I'll do a video on that later. Cygnus Lumber did a great job milling this lumber for me, but I gotta be honest, it wasn't ready to glue up as soon as I got it, and that's okay. I really wasn't expecting it to be. The problem is, I only have one thing I can use to get a straight edge, and that's my track saw. I don't have a joiner. I've never used a joiner plane even once in my life, and I tried a router with a pattern cutting bit and a straight edge, and well, that was a horrible experience. All of this to say, some of these joints came out perfect and some didn't. The Festool track saw cuts a straight line, but it's not a joiner. I don't usually like to say, it's good enough, but in this case, I had no choice. I got all the pieces laid out as good as I could, got all the edges as straight as possible, and started gluing them up. I didn't want to just use butt joints for these, only because they're so big and I didn't want the panic of trying to keep things straight during the glue up. So for the purposes of keeping things lined up, I decided to use biscuits, but there was only one thing keeping me from doing that. I didn't have a biscuit joiner. I used to have a DeWalt one, but it got stolen from me like all the rest of my tools did, and I didn't really want to shell out almost $300 for a new DeWalt one, so I went cheap. I ordered the Wen biscuit joiner from Lowe's.com, and it was only like $57. Is it as good as the DeWalt? Hell no. It's not good at all, but it did get the job done. I don't normally buy the cheapest tool I can find, but I'm also not a tool snob. Well, actually, that's a lie. I'm a total tool snob, but I don't want to drop $300 on a tool I'm going to use one time and then have it sit in my shed underneath my Dremel tool and corded Sawzall and manual plumbing auger that I never use. Tools that I use regularly, I'll spend the money on. Tools that are going to be a one-time use or I buy for a specific project, I'll cheap out. I'm not here to shit all over this Wen tool, but I'll just say this. If I used a biscuit joiner regularly, there's no way I would have bought this. This panel's final dimensions, and yes, by the way, it is a panel, not a slab. A lot of people are going to want to call it a slab. A slab is one big giant piece of wood straight from the tree. This is a panel. Anyway, the final dimensions are going to be 75.5 by 47.5. And with it being that big, I had to glue it up in 2 halves and then glue those 2 halves together. And if I'm being honest, this did not go well at all. Gluing up a panel that's basically 4 feet wide is never fun, but when you have edges that aren't perfect, it makes it so much worse. Oh well, nothing a little wood filler won't hide, right? That's how all the pros do it. Now that's another lie. Anyone that's a woodworker that sees this will see that filler, but your average person, hopefully they won't. When the panels were glued up, I used my track saw again to square it up and cut it to size, and then it was time to start the most grueling part of this process, the sanding. Let me tell you, I film everything while I'm doing these projects, and when I imported all the footage of me sanding this piece into my computer, it was over 9 hours. And it still wasn't enough. Since I've talked about Blacktail Studio so much already, I might as well bring him up again. In all of his videos, he has footage of him painstakingly going through the entire piece and sanding it like a madman. This is absolutely necessary if you want the perfect results he gets. Me, I wanted that perfection. I did what I've done hundreds of times. I started with 60 grit because the wood was still pretty rough from the planer, then moved up to 80, 100, 120, 150, and then 180. I used one of my favorite simple sanding tricks, which is to scribble pencil marks all over the piece so I knew where I sanded and where I haven't. And between every grit, I also went through with wood filler and CA glue to fill in small imperfections. And like I said, it still wasn't enough. And I didn't know it wasn't enough until the finish was already on. I had no choice. I gave up on perfection and settled for, that'll work. It still looks really good though, and there's not many things in this world that feel better than a nicely sanded massive piece of cherry. Before I did the final sanding of 180 grit, I used my router with a 1/4 inch, it might have been a 1/2 inch round over bit. I don't even remember, but I rounded over the top and the bottom. Our plan is to get granite on all the other countertops in the kitchen, and this profile is what we're going to plan on getting, so I wanted some consistency. After sanding it with 180 grit, I went over it again with CA glue and then marked it up with the pencil lines again and hit it one last time with the 180, just doing it over again just to be sure I did enough. And that was the final sanding. Then it was time to lose my Rubio Monocoat virginity. If you don't know my backstory, I'll tell it to you really quick. I've been a woodworker most of my life, and back in 2006, I started a custom cabinet / antique restoration shop, and all of my dreams were coming true. I had all the stationary tools that you could ever ask for and could basically build anything. Well, in 2009, my personal life completely fell apart and I had to shut the shop down. I don't really want to go into detail here, but I'll just say it was pretty dramatic, and I think anyone in my shoes would have done the same thing. If you really want to know the whole story, I'll put a card in the corner for a live stream I did where I explained the whole thing. Anyway, while I had that shop, I really specialized in finishing and loved it way more than I thought I would. I was even a contract finisher for a couple of small cabinet shops in my area, so yeah, I was a pretty big deal. Every day of my life back then, I would have said, if someone would just invent a finish that you just wipe on and wipe off and you're done, they'll be a billionaire overnight. Well, someone did invent that. I have no idea who actually invented it, but there's several brands of hard wax oils out there that are on the market. One of the most popular brands is Rubio Monocoat. Thanks, Cam. As I said earlier, it was Aaron at Cygnus Lumber that turned me onto this color, and it does exactly what I've been saying. You just put it on, let it sit for a few minutes, and then buff it in. And that's exactly what I did. But for my specific situation, it was complicated by one thing: the heat. According to the recommendations from Rubio Monocoat, you apply the finish being sure to cover the entire surface. You give it about 5 minutes and then buff it in, being sure to remove as much of the finish as possible. If you've looked into Rubio, you've heard this 100 times. You can't remove too much of this finish, but you can leave too much on. Well, they say something like that. Okay, fine. I poured it out like I've seen so many other YouTubers do and got to work buffing it in. This is where I made 2 mistakes, both of which I didn't realize until it was too late. The first was using my sander with the white pad on it. This was a stupid idea. It didn't make things easier, and my sander is now all brown and disgusting looking. I will never make that mistake again. But that really doesn't matter. I mean, it's just cosmetic. Now we need to talk about the real issue. I did exactly what I've seen so many others on YouTube do. I poured the finish on the top and then worked it in with the sander. And since I knew it was hot out there and the finish would probably set up faster than it should, I didn't wait the 5 minutes to buff it in. Basically, as soon as the entire top was coated, I started buffing it in. It went really well. I mean, it was a workout, but it went on without incident. Or so I thought. I let it sit for a few hours and came back to look at it and said, what in the hell is this? I could see all these lines running through the finish. These are very prominent curved lines that are about 1/4 inch wide running all through the top. I was baffled for about 2 minutes till I figured out what it was. These are the lines where I dumped the finish out of the cup. I have video evidence of this. My assumption is because it was so hot out there, the finish started to set up as soon as I started pouring it. So that settles where it came from. Now, what do I do about it? Well, I can tell you what not to do. Don't do like I did and think, well, the whole concept of Rubio is if you have uneven areas and you add a second coat, it'll even everything out. I knew this and said to myself, well, I'm planning on doing a second coat anyway, so I'm sure this problem will just correct itself. Spoiler alert, it didn't. My original plan for this was to install the countertop and then finish it in place where the temperature will make things much easier to manage. But obviously I didn't do that, and now I'm regretting it. Now that I'm in this situation, what I should have done is 2 things. First, sand the finish off entirely, move the countertop into the house, and go with my original plan. But nope. I just let it go because we had our daughter coming in for Lisa's birthday and her boyfriend David was going to be with her. I wanted to take full advantage of having him here to help me get this thing in. It is way heavier than it looks. We got the top moved in and I installed it with figure 8 fasteners. The install was super simple, but we're still left with this issue. And now I'm experiencing my #1 personal flaw when it comes to DIY projects. I can't look at this island top without seeing those lines taunting me. They haunt me in my dreams and make me feel like a lazy failure. So I have to redo this. I'm not going to be able to live with myself if I don't. I'm going to sand the entire top back down to the bare wood and refinish it in place. Now I know this is going to sound really weird, but I actually felt really good while I was doing this. You see, I had this top installed for a week prior to this footage you're seeing now, and those lines were driving me absolutely crazy the entire time. I was battling with myself the whole week. Am I going to redo it? Am I just going to deal with it? And every time someone comes over, wondering if they're noticing that or not. Am I a lazy piece of shit if I don't do it? So once I started it, I felt good. I'm not a piece of shit. I'm sacrificing an entire day to make sure this gets done right. Yes, I'm tooting my own horn here. I'm proud of myself. To be truthful, this didn't take all day. It took me about 3 hours and 4 batteries to sand the finish off and then work my way up through the grits again, but it wasn't nearly as bad as the first time. Once I had it all sanded, I started the process of finishing all over again, and it went exactly as it should. The Rubio didn't cure as fast, so I had more time to work with it, and there wasn't as much panic. It was definitely a workout though, but when you consider how easy it is and how good the results are, it's definitely worth it. And we all see it, we just don't want to be mean and point out the obvious. Me getting a workout is a much needed thing. The next day, I used a maroon 3M pad to scuff it up again and added the second coat, and guess what? There's no more lines. This island top is no longer taunting me. It's done. It might not be what I originally set out to do, but I am absolutely thrilled with the results. I gotta tell you, I know I'm pretty late to the hard wax oil party, and there's been tons of other brands that have come out, but this Rubio monocoat is really good stuff. At least I think it is. Of course, I won't really know until it gets some use and I see how it holds up through time, but as of right now, it looks and feels absolutely amazing. Even though I had to buy it twice. As I stated earlier, I did order the N3 Nano from Blacktail Studios. It's a ceramic coating which should be perfect for a situation like this, but I'm not going to be putting it on in this video. You can't apply it till the finish is completely cured, so I'm going to wait a couple of weeks and then put it on. I'll do a video on that too. Maybe get some views if I put Blacktail Studio in the title. This has been a wild ride, but here we are. It's done. And it's not just the island that's done. This concludes the work that I'll be doing on this kitchen. We still have to eventually replace the appliances and get the granite for the rest of the countertops, but that's not going to be right now. We've got to recover financially from all this other stuff first. If you've watched all the episodes of this kitchen remodel, I want to thank you for hanging in there with me. And if this is the first video you've watched in the series, I encourage you to click on the playlist at the end of this video and watch the whole thing. Maybe if enough of you watch it, I'll be able to get those countertops and appliances sooner rather than later. Fingers crossed. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.